audio by Raising Free People Network.
I'm Akila S. Richards, grief literacy educator, longtime podcaster, here to explore what we lose individually and collectively when we fail to name grief as part of our everyday life. Grief isn't just about death, it's about endings, expired relationships, outgrown roles, identities and dreams we released. If we tend to grief in its diversity, we can expand our capacity to navigate change, to hold space for each other, and to move with more presence in a rapidly shifting world. This is What I Let Die podcast, where we move from grief struck to grief tending. What happens when we stop avoiding grief? Let's find out together. Hey, you. Welcome back to What I Let Die podcast. I'm Akila S. Richards, and in these episodes, we talk about grief, change, and all the ways we learn to live with the things that we didn't choose or was really painful to choose. If you've been following along in the series, you know that we've been building the foundations for grief literacy. The premise was to start with the foundations, which were the first 3 episodes. And now we're moving from the foundations, that understanding of what grief actually is, beyond the narrow ways that we've been told and taught about it. And now we're shifting into more of the personal work, into grief as it shows up in your body, in your mind, in your relationship, and in how you see yourself and how others see you. I put all of this in the category of identity. So we're opening up this second part of the 4-part series by talking about identity deaths, the ways we lose, shed, or outgrow parts of ourselves. And related to that, the way that other people's shifting identities can feel like a loss to us. Yes, that's a whole lot of that we're going to get into today. So let's start with naming identity deaths. There are so many ways that we move through the world holding on to certain ideas about ourselves, right? Roles, titles, ways we move, ways we think. And then something happens, something over time or something suddenly, and those pieces start to fall away. These are what I call identity deaths, the deaths of parts of ourselves that used to help us make sense of who we are. And I'm going to go into the specific examples of this so you can really draw on your own experiences. But I want to talk about some of the characteristics of it before I get into examples. One aspect is that some of these identity deaths, sometimes they are chosen. Like when we decide we don't want to be the fixer anymore, right? Or when we step away from a career that shaped our identity but nearly broke us in other ways. So sometimes this identity death is chosen. Other times it's forced, like with an illness, a diagnosis of some kind, a breakup, a betrayal, or even joy and growth. Those things can shift us out of who we thought we were. And these types of deaths are often invisible, but they shape our lives as much as any other loss. So identity death can be a type of kananapo, as we've talked about, right? These non-body deaths that shape us and weigh on us just as much as any other type of loss. And what makes identity death especially painful sometimes is that the world around us might not see it or acknowledge it. So people might still expect us to be who we used to be, to keep performing that role. And when we can't or don't, there is grief. Grief for who we were, grief for who people still want us to be, grief for who we thought we would become. Real, right? Yeah. And let's drop even further into it by talking about the grief of being seen incorrectly, being called out your name. And maybe it's your new name, right? So, one of the threads that I want to pull on today is what happens when other people won't or cannot update their idea of who we are. They stuck on the old you and they're adamant about wanting to be in touch with that old version of you. Is this familiar? Can you relate? So maybe you've done the deep work of letting go of an old identity, right? Maybe mm, being the strong one or the good girl or the person who always says yes. But what happens when people around you keep relating to you as if you're still holding that role? What happens when you've outgrown a version of yourself, but the people in your life are still holding on to it? That's its own kind of grief. It's a grief that can feel like being trapped inside a story that you didn't write, or a story that you did write, but it's no longer a fit. And if you are someone who's been grieving silently, grieving privately, these moments can feel especially raw, like being unseen at a time when you're already feeling vulnerable. I know that life, you probably do too. I want to share with you inside the I Let It Die grief literacy course. I talked about identity deaths, and we shared in our little caravan our own experiences about the loss of identity. My share was about the loss of identity as being somebody who is fit, being a dancer type, and how that started to unravel when I started feeling the very real effects of perimenopause in my body and wasn't able to move a certain way, or my body is looking very differently than what I'm used to. So I'm going to share that segment with you now. And when we come back, then we'll go deeper into how identity death affects our relationship with other people, especially the people close to us. But listen in here and see if you can relate. There are a lot of things that are not about us in the variety of ways that we come to relationships. I know that I find it useful, sometimes painful, to remember that it ain't always about me. But this time is, and I want to remind you of that, this is all about you. The purpose, the investment in this time is about you and your relationship with your skill sets for grief, the tending to, the discovery of, the points of connection within, the type of grief that often goes unnamed, which is what our 80 minutes will be all about in this particular session. 4 special, specific, often untended to types of grief that I'm going to name and invite you to dig into for yourself, for yourselves, for yourselves, all the things that comprise you. I have up here this kananapo and the quote about the types of grief, and I'm going to pin it for a moment. And the word offering for that is kananapo from me, and also whatever words you've invited in for us to play with and be in the energy of. I know, Vani, you mentioned a similar word that showed up for you. And I really invite that here. Like, don't hold on to my shit like it's the shit. It's often an example of what it means to allow yourself to be present with something. So don't use this space to avoid anything. Don't use this space even to necessarily try to heal anything that can be really harmfully premature. Please feel into the invitations here and make it as much about you as you possibly can. I'm going to start with the first of the four, and it's about loss of identity. So when you hear or see the word identity, be with what shows up for you. Like personally, what, who, where is connected to your sense of identity. Roles, ROLES, can definitely play a part in that. Being someone's something can be really linked to identity. Culture, the culture of the people you look like, if you know them, the culture of the people you grew up with, the culture of the people who sound like you. There are so many ways that we experience loss in relationship to our identities. What does that mean for you specifically? As an entrepreneur, there is so much work that I consistently do out of necessity or reaction or proactivity and a bunch of shit in between around identity, my perception of success or failure or worth or productivity, progress, ambition, lack, loss of. Yeah. And in this grief tending, we are oftentimes schoolish in that we try to pin it down and be like, all right, I've identified one. Now what? And I really invite you to turn question marks into something that you sit in, like think about it like a chair. You like scoot your butt back and sit in the question mark. You're not trying to do anything with it. It's a cradle. It's a place to experience. An aspect of loss of identity that I'll offer here is around changes in my physical body and identity attachment to dancer, strong, fit, and as a perimenopausal body, noticing that is absolutely connected to my sense of identity, learning how to be in relationship with this version of my body and capacity, and even projections about what's natural and normal and what ain't. uh, yeah, that's huge for me right now. And when the grief around that was not tended to, I just try to go harder, work out more, eat less, blah, 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 find different workouts. But then as it became recognized or I could see it as grief, then it opened up a whole world, first of all, of neutrality, like not needing to love whatever the thing is, like the hairs that I mentioned that grow on my chin. It's not about learning to love that. It's questioning, it's questioning, period. It's writing songs for my body. Sometimes they're war songs, sometimes they're battle songs, sometimes they're love songs, sometimes they're just like dance hall type shit that I can move to and shake to. Hey, hey. It just opened up so many different ways of finding out, finding out what's happening over here now, what's true for me, what the book said, what am I experiencing, what am I relying on, what is my relationship to the foods that I think I'm supposed to eat, and how am I vilifying the other ones? How am I learning to only love the things that my body loves back? And be in a different relationship with the things that I love for like nostalgic reasons or chemical reasons. Identity. Don't forget that you can pause this episode. If things showed up for you that you really want to take the time to be with, do that. Take the time, because this is all for you. This is all about your grief literacy skill building. Now, I want to move into a little bit deeper into the grief of how we see others, because we just explored a bit about how we experience identity death personally. You heard my example, and hopefully, you will take some time to feel into yours. And so now I want to open this door to how this shows up when we witness other people changing, or when they don't change in ways that we really, really freaking hope that they would have. Because identity deaths aren't just about who we are, they're also about how we see the people we love. So in this instance, we can think about the strong one or the reliable one, and then they age or they become ill, and suddenly that role starts to crumble. We can think about a friend who decides to walk away from a shared faith or aspects of culture or political identity, and we feel like we lose the version of them that we knew. Um, Another example is a child who grows up and no longer needs us in the ways that they did before. Come on now. And that shift can kind of feel like a death, too. These are the moments that ask us to grieve what we expected of them, what we knew of them, or what we needed them to be. And I think that is oftentimes one of the hardest things about identity deaths. They require a type of flexibility and compassion that we don't always have on hand when the shit hurts. So, this is why it's important to name it so we can really acknowledge and feel into what we are experiencing. And we can name the layers of it. So, in this episode, I definitely encourage you to feel into the layers of this. So, here's what I'll do. Let me open up my questions over here. Yes, because I believe very strongly in mad question asking as a way of getting further into what we're feeling and what we need to move past the surface reaction to the feeling and move deeper into what we can do about how we want to feel. And a huge part of that is to be able to name the layers. So, identity death is about the ways that we lose, shed, or outgrow parts of ourselves, and the ways that other people's shifting identities can feel like loss for us. That's essentially what it's about. So, as we start to close, I just want to say that if this conversation, if this aspect of grief tending stirs up something in you and you're sitting with questions about who you are now or who you've stopped being, I'm really honored to hold that space with you, even from a distance. I want to say that. And of course, this is not a one-time conversation. We're going to keep unfolding this thing. We're going to keep tugging at this thread. And we're going to go in the next episode into a deeper layer of personal grief that I think so many of us hold silently, which is the grief connected to our work. But let's move into these questions here for you first. These questions that are meant to allow you to reflect on this type of grief and how it's showing up in your own life. The first question for you is, what parts of yourself have you outgrown, shed, or lost, either by choice or by force? That's question one. What parts of yourself have you outgrown, shed, or lost, by choice or by force? My second question for you is, who in your life is currently grieving the loss of a version of you that no longer exists? Who in your life is currently grieving the loss of a version of you that no longer exists? My third question for you: are there people in your life whose changes feel like a loss to you? And what do you wish you could say to them? Are there people in your life whose changes feel like a loss to you? What do you wish you could say to them? And remember, this is all about you. You may not even share this with them, but you are unearthing, uncovering, putting a flashlight to these spaces that often sit in the dark. And that alone is super helpful in your grief tending work. My final question for you for this episode, love, is, how do you want to be seen now, in this moment, as you are? How do you want to be seen now, in this moment, as you are? I want you to take your time with those questions, because these are big, layered questions, and sometimes the answers themselves might even shape shift as we sit with them. And I want you to give them the space to do that. Next week, we're going to move into that other layer of personal grief. We're going to talk about the grief of losing work we loved or believed in, the grief of staying in work that no longer fits but feels necessary for our survival. We're going to talk about the grief around ambition and productivity and how capitalism shaped who we thought we were supposed to be, right? The way that it makes us tie our worth to our output, our achievements, are constantly doing the most. We're going to talk about all of that next week, because when we start to unravel identity deaths, then our relationships to work and how we survive is often right up underneath that. So that's why I want to talk about it in this order. So if grief in your professional life or the weight of capitalism on your sense of self has been on your mind, make sure you join me next week. Do not forget that I'm blogging over on radicalselfie.org, and every week after an episode airs, and they air on Sundays, I do a short postmortem debriefing about that episode. And in that debrief will always be a link to the Wild Podcast chat room, where we can talk in even more detail amongst ourselves about these things. As always, thank you for being here, for listening, for allowing space for these conversations that do not have pretty little, neat little conclusions. And I would love to hear from you. So if you are moving through an identity death right now and just need to say it out loud, come on over to radicalselfie.org, find the post in the Wild Podcast section, and share. I would love to witness that with you. Peace, and I'll talk to you next week.
This episode is part of a multi-episode series that serves as a public, free grief literacy project called What I Let Die podcast. The show is co-produced by Akila S. Richards and Kate Umstatter Thompson. Show art by Chris Richards. Much of the content comes from or is inspired by Akila's Grief Tenders course called the Eyelid Course, an acronym for I Let It Die. Show notes and resources are available at radicalselfie.org/wild. Share the show with friends and be sure to rate the show wherever you listen to it.
Audio by Raising Free People Network.